On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Naama Stauber Breckler. She's the co-founder and CEO at BetterHealth. And I also have Adam Breckler. He's the co-founder, head of product at BetterHealth. We're going to be talking about meeting patients where they're at. And what do I mean by that? Obviously, we're seeing a lot of solutions that are coming to market to improve patient care, patient outcomes. We're going to talk about what BetterHealth is doing to do that. They have a pretty interesting path to that. They're getting into medical supplies. They're actually using data and understanding how to help the provider and the patient. We're going to cover a lot. We're going to see how much we can fit in. Hopefully it'll be really entertaining. And Naama, Adam, I'm really excited to have you both on the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Amir. Good to be here.
Absolutely. All right. Before we start, BetterHealth, could one of you, both of you, maybe tell us a little bit about what the company does before we dive on in?
So at BetterHealth, our focus is on helping people with chronic conditions manage their health at home, outside the hospital, improve their health outcomes, reduce total cost of care, which is a similar mission to many companies. But what's unique about what we do is the population we're focused on and how we do it. So we're focused on people who have chronic condition with dependencies on different home medical devices and supplies. Think people with ostomies, chronic retention, chronic wounds, diabetes, the list goes on. And the way that our solution works is two main parts. One, we make it super easy for people to get those medical supplies, which often they need every month for the rest of their lives, for our online platform that makes discovery, education, and ordering super easy. And two, we have a network of peer support specialists who have the same conditions as our members. And that's where the magic really happens. So these are the people who are most intimately, uniquely positioned to really understand what our members are going through because they've been through it as well. So they serve as health coaches and they're there to help our members build the skills and knowledge they need to manage their condition and to provide emotional support. And really help them normalize the condition. And the results that we're seeing is that, more than 80% of the people who go through peer support program report they were able to avoid unnecessary healthcare visit because their questions were answered. We're able to help them solve the problem.
I'm super excited to get to that peer support because, interesting is sometimes when you do have an issue, you really don't know where to go. So I think it's actually going to be really intriguing part of the conversation. Before we get there, I'd like to understand a little bit about the challenges around better patient care and outcomes now. We all hear about insurance providers and all these different obstacles of people getting better patient care, seeing better outcomes. Is it as simple as pointing fingers and going, hey, you know what, it is the insurance and the medical providers not working well enough together, or there's just a lot of difficulties? I mean, what are some of the challenges that keep people from seeing better care?
Well, it's a very long list, I would say. But maybe we can start by saying, acknowledging that the healthcare system is super complicated. And part of the complexity comes from the person that receives the services is not necessarily the person who pays for the services, that will be the payer. And then the person who delivers the services is also not the person who paid. They don't get paid by the person they deliver the service to. So you have many different stakeholders that need to all kind of synergetically work together. And I think one of the most difficult things in our healthcare system for the patients is actually that whole navigating your care journey and care coordination. So you have different providers helping you with different areas. Sometimes when you have a new condition, whether you need a surgery or now you're post-surgery and you need some medical supplies, you don't even know where to start and how to start in getting them. And we have patients that come to us, maybe they're dealing with cancer, they're dealing with some really serious conditions. And, one of the things we hear a lot is like, wow, it's so amazing to have a provider who actually takes some of the burden off of your shoulders because they need to navigate sometimes 5, 6 and more different providers that they work with. I think that part is extremely challenging for people. So I'm sure Adam has some things to add here, but I will just say that's the start of just not knowing how to navigate the system.
Just to add on a little bit to that, what Naama said, I think, our wedge, so to speak, is that we are that provider that provides our patients something that's essential to their day-to-day life in the form of these medical supplies. And so as a byproduct of that, we actually have the most touch points with our patients, even more than their primary care physician, even more than their specialists. And that 10.5 visits or interactions that we have with them on average per year provides us the foundation and the relationship to be able to know them better than their physicians, collect more information on them. That informs a lot of the data side of the equation as well, that I'm sure we'll talk about. But that's really our secret sauce, I guess, is having all of those frequent touch points.
Actually, I think that's a great point about patients not knowing where to go. I think everyone's been in that scenario of trying to figure out what doctor. You ask people for advice. You go and become literally a WebMD and try to figure out what your problem is. And we're all looking to figure out who to talk to. And obviously then there's an insurance component. So I think, Naama, you made a great point of just knowing where to start sometimes is a complexity in itself. And obviously you mentioned there's multiple stakeholders and there's people receiving services that they don't fully pay for. There's a lot of complexity. And you guys are dealing with some of the medical supplies as well. So you're actually finding out who receives what product, and you're then able to go backwards and figure out, well, what is it there for? Why are they needing this? And you guys can actually collect some of that data. And I guess, Adam, as you were kind of talking about that, when you guys are seeing these multiple stakeholders and data collection, how complex is it within the healthcare field to actually see the trees of the forest when it comes to data and data collection?
Yeah, it's quite complex. I mean, as I'm sure you or maybe some of your audience, there's not very well established standards when it comes to data sharing and data privacy. And I think a lot of that, there are standards enforced by HIPAA, and of course we follow that. All the other providers and health systems and payers that we work with and have those same set of standards. But when it comes to the actual nitty gritty of data sharing formats, HL7, FHIR, all these things are standards that are not yet really universally adopted, I guess. So oftentimes people are talking different languages in terms of data formats. We could receive data from providers in the form of faxes, and then we need to leverage tools like generative AI and OCR technology to basically read that data, put it into a format that we expect to be able to feed into our software. And so kind of translating data across a lot of different formats because of the lack of standardization is a challenge that we face as a provider, and everyone else that we interact with in the ecosystem faces as well.
I'm going to add to that, as technology companies, I think everyone who, Adam and I, both engineers in our background, and I think sometimes the tendency is really to want to come and automate everything. And especially when you get to healthcare, there's so much to automate because there's so many manual processes. And I think there are a few things that are important to acknowledge. One, even if you'll have the most automated system, sometimes you'll work with a payer that on the other end, there's no system. Like they're just used to doing this process manually, and you have to pick up the call and talk to Susan and get the paperwork from her. And two, it's really hard to change habits, and you need a relationship and trust and a clear value add before people are willing to change their habit. So if you think you're going to go to a doctor office and say, hey, we built this amazing system from you, all the team, all the nurses, all the MAs, starting tomorrow, you're starting to use this system, and this office wants to fax, guess what? They'll find Joe down the street who's willing to get a fax from them and deliver the services as well. So when we talk about meeting patients where they are, we're really meeting all of our 3 Ps where they are, like our providers and our payers as well. And that means that if an office insists on sending faxes, we're going to get their faxes and use all the tools in the background that Adam mentioned to get all the information and automate it as much as we can when we process it. And after we serve, dozens of their patients and we build a relationship with their team and they trust and love the service, maybe then we can start introducing, hey, here's a really easy online system that you can use instead of the fax. Do you want me to walk you through it? And then the adoption and the willingness to adopt increases dramatically.
That's pretty interesting, because you hear most providers, even insurance companies, they're like, hey, patient care. I call my insurance company, and it's a part of the pitch, and we're here for your optimal patient, all that stuff. But kind of what I heard is some of the reason and there's lots of complexity. It's a big ecosystem. I mean, it's massive. I'm not going to say it's a simple problem. Hey, everyone, let's just talk to each other and make it really easy. But everyone knows everyone wants better patient care. The providers, the payers. It's a commonly understood thing. But then it almost sounds like at an adoption level, there's so much friction that it becomes difficult to actually deliver upon any product's potential, because you have somebody or someplace where there's an obstacle, let alone just standardization. I think Adam kind of mentioned some of the standards, and they have to talk to each other, and all that complexity. And this might be just a hypothetical, but it sounds like everyone wants better patient care. But then it also sounds like not everyone's willing to take the steps or actually be on the same page to actually deliver that patient care. Is that fair, or is that just because it's a complex system? It's just not that easy, Amir. It's just not going to be the way you think it is.
I think it's a really complex system and a lot of competing priorities as well. So if you think of a payer organization, like even the smallest payer would have probably, hundreds, if not thousands of employees, literally the smallest plan. And you have demands that you have from CMS, from the federal. You have demands that you get on the state level. And then you have different populations that you might serve. Maybe it's Medicaid, so more lower income, Medicare, 65 plus, and disabilities, and commercial plans, and, fully funded plans. So many different demands. And then you need to sit there and prioritize, like, how do you satisfy all of your mandatory demands? How do you push the envelope so you'll keep being competitive as a payer, because everyone has other options as well? And how do you introduce enough plans that would really improve outcomes, reduce cost? And there's a balancing act. And there's also a lot of different stakeholders who need to agree to things. So actually, and we can talk about that more as well, but like the process of selling to payers, that's why when people are like, oh, this process that take at least 18 months, it's true. And you're like, 18 months, how can any sales process take that long? But you really need to build the relationship, the trust, get the buy-in from the different stakeholders. And just being such a large organization, they do move in a different pace. But I would say that I wholeheartedly agree with the statement you made initially, that everyone do want to eventually improve health outcomes. And I think there's also a big understanding among the payers that even being such a big organization with so many resources, they can't do all of that themselves because of the complexity of it and because of knowing the pace that they move. And they know that they need to partner with organizations that can help them push things forward and push things faster. And that's what opens the door and opportunities for us and for companies like us.
So I've noticed that over the years that each part of the system has been improving. I've noticed the health insurance has been improving, the doctor's offices, everyone's technology is getting better. You guys work with medical supplies, and you guys have to touch all three of those different stakeholders. The complexity to work across the three stakeholders to make sure that you're integrating and getting that adoption, from your perspective and actually the data side of it, being on the medical supply side, you guys said you guys have a lot more touch points with the patient. Kind of talk about that data, that touch point, and how it actually allows, better to actually improve the ecosystem as a whole.
When we started the company, we actually started out with patients first. So, that was sort of the North Star for us, is to super serve patients. And when we sort of layered on these other at that point, it was really just patients, us, and then the providers to a certain extent, because we had to fetch documentation and form that relationship, but that was a little bit secondary. So that's sort of our journey towards serving those three Ps, we call them, patients, providers, and payers. And then the payer side, which Naama can probably talk more about, is something that has really started to evolve. It started with, building out our network. So we were having to go to payers and just get in network with them in order to be able to serve their patients that were coming to us through these direct-to-consumer channels. So we didn't have like really personal or sort of really solid relationships with them at that point. And then since then, that's evolved quite a bit. So we've been starting to form deeper partnerships with payers, where instead of just being a network as a provider in their network serving their patients, we actually have more of a firm relationship where they'll send us their patients in order to receive services from us. And so that's a new channel for us that we've been developing that has all sorts of other requirements on the technology side. I'm sure we can talk about, but that was sort of the progression. So we were always first really focused on super serving patients, and then layering in providers, and then payers in that order.
I'll add to that actually, maybe it'll be helpful. I'll give a little background. So in my previous company, we spun a medical device company out of Stanford. It was a new type of intermittent catheter for people with chronic retention. Commercialized the product, FDA reimbursement, commercialization, acquisition, when the whole process. And when we commercialized it, we had to work with a lot of the existing distributors, with providers. But then, we generated a market share. People would use the products, but then would hand them off to a DME provider or someone else to serve them. And what I realized is that if at that point, we basically lost control over the quality and the experience of the most important stakeholder, which is the end patient. You send them to another provider. Maybe they keep sending them that product that they wanted, but a lot of times they try to switch them to other products. They didn't deliver the product sometime. People stop being happy, and maybe they would, as a result, churn from our product. And I realized that if we want to have the biggest impact that we can on the most important stakeholders, which is the end patient, we have to own that relationship. And if you own that relationship and do a really good job, not and a good job is composed of, yes, making them feel good, improving their health outcomes, but it also needs to translate to some economic value, like reducing their cost of care as a result, maybe reducing overutilization of care, improving mental health. Then you actually delivering value to the other really important stakeholders, like the providers who are seeing there and doing a lot of their other care, and then the payers who are actually paying for these services. So when we started Better Health, that's why it was our main focus. We're like, if we can do an incredible job for the patients and get evidence at big enough scale that this actually impacts how many doctor or ER visits they're doing, how is their level of, anxiety, depression, their mental health, then we have something that is powerful, and we can go and sell it to a health system, that value proposition, and sell it to payers and get paid for that additional value that we create. So we really staged it. And that's why initially, we talked about meeting patients where they are. We knew there are a lot of people out there who are just not happy, not able to get the products they have a lot of questions that maybe they ask Dr. Google or they rush to the ER to get answers for. So these are the people that we initially targeted. A lot of them were just online. So we would, like Adam said, we'd partner with the insurance on a very more shallow level of being an in-network provider and being able to get paid for these products. And people would find us, they would search on Google, they would go to, forums, support groups, like Facebook, and they would find Better Health and would get to us, and we would deliver those services. And we started collecting data super early on so we can understand the real impact. And then, after 2 years, when we already served thousands of people, we had their data, we knew more of the impact, we could start more really developing our B2B strategy and target providers and payers.
Yeah, actually, as you were talking, I had to get both my hip labrums repaired a couple of years ago, and it's not a common surgery. There's not a lot of information. I ended up finding a Reddit that I joined, and I was like, it became my lifeline. And as you're talking, I'm like, oh, this happens, and it's real. Like I went through it. I had questions about medical supplies, and the company my doctor worked with was okay, but I felt like it was more like, here's what he said, just take it. I was like, well, how do you use this? How do you use that? And it took days for somebody to get back to me, and it was me going back to Reddit and asking 50,000 questions of people. And luckily there's a good community. And I've actually stayed on. I've actually now 2 years past my surgery, but I kind of felt like if somebody asks a question, I actually understand it. I'm going to give back to them because I benefited. So I actually really am like, wow, this is interesting because I witnessed it firsthand. I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to have as well. When you guys are looking at the medical supply and you're talking about people that are coming back to you and meeting patients where they're at, some of these questions that may go unanswered, that are difficult to get answers to or require you to have a doctor's visit or something. When you think about that component of the business and the goal of the company being where patients at, was the peer support always something that you kind of thought, hey, this is something that would help alongside medical supplies, or is it just did it? I mean, it kind of sounded like it might be organic, but was it an organic part of the business that kind of grew, or how did it become?
It's funny you're saying it because it's true. Peer support for chronic condition is something that exists organically, but it's been hard to kind of more institutionalize it and scale it in high quality. And that's really what we're doing. And the way that it came into Better Health, so when we started, again, we knew from my past experience that there's a massive industry, literally tens of millions of Americans who need different products. The incumbents are mostly companies from the pre-internet days, and their logistics and supplies, not technology or healthcare or focus on customer experience. So we knew there was a great opportunity, but we knew that it's not enough. We knew people have all these questions, but we didn't necessarily have the exact answer for how we solve it. And it really started organically initially. We actually were really lucky to have a few people on the team who were also, they're excited about the company and the mission because they had that problem personally. And when people would call to be like, do you have someone that I can talk to who might be able to give me like a little more information? I have more questions. We would always send them to talk to these two people at the end of the call. And they would just finish with these epiphanies. Like people would cry on the call, say, where can I write a review? This person changed my life. Wow, I never met someone with this who also dealt with this condition. I feel like I met my new best friend. Like literally, these are quotes from people. And once we started hearing it more and more, we're like, wait a minute. This is a huge unlock. Like if every person who goes through this feels alone in the world, like they're the only person, and all of a sudden they found someone they can talk to who can help them, who's been through that as well and knows what are the tips and tricks, like basic things you need to know, whether it's like your diet or, daily handling, what do you do in emergencies? It was just such a big unlock that we started basically productize and programize it.
Yeah, funny enough too. We actually found our first peer support specialists from Reddit that we recruited for our network. So they were giving answers there before we met them.
Yeah, and a lot of it also came from just that research, like Adam said, just going on Reddit, going on support group and seeing what is done in that microcosmos and understanding that not everyone is there. Like, how can we help scale it and also improve the quality, right? So we know that the advice you're getting is the right one.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously advice, and as you guys described it, getting the right advice, I guess would be interesting to understand the power of having the medical supply and the peer support, because it's nice where you can get support. But I also think what sometimes is missing, and dealing with other medical supply companies you get stuff from, there is a disconnect from when you end up with something. I think I joke with you. My wife had, I snore. My wife was like, you need to do a sleep test for apnea. So and they sent me the kit. It showed up and it had some instructions, but I was actually struggling. I was like trying to figure out exactly how to put this thing. I tried calling. No one picked up, and I was like, well, I've got to do it tonight. Today's like the cutoff. And I just kind of was like, all right, best guess. So I'm going to just do it. It would have been great to have had, somebody I could have called and been like, hey, Amir, sounds like I'm inept at medical supplies as I'm describing it. But I think a lot of people get these devices and we don't know. We don't see them all the time. They're new to us. We're not experts at these things. And the pairing of the two, and I guess the power, the data behind it, kind of talk to us a little bit about how those two fit together and how it's kind of an advantage for you guys.
Yeah. So, it's a really astute observation. I think, what we found to be true, really in this is that the patient who's the person who's using those supplies so intimately and on a daily basis really is the expert for those supplies. It's not the provider. So 9 times out of 10, the questions that you have related to those supplies are not well answered by your doctor. So or a nurse even. So if you could get, an answer from them, that you were to go through the process of scheduling a session, you might not even get the right advice because they haven't used those products personally. They've seen lots of patients who have used them, but that's a little bit different than the actual day-to-day usage that somebody who's actually been in your shoes experiences. So, I think that's a key part of the peer support value proposition, if you will, is that you can get not only the product recommendations, but also that lived experience from the peer of actually integrating products into their life. They may have good recommendations for you based on your body type or based on your age or based on your dexterity level, and have brand recommendations that maybe, somebody else might not be able to provide, who doesn't have that personal lived experience. So when it comes to, data collection, to answer the second part of your question, what we're developing is really this really rich data set of patient preferences around different product lines and manufacturers. And then we couple that with that, lived experience from the peers. And then we create essentially a feedback loop where we can then go and fine tune these recommendations that get influenced by the peer recommendations, but can be done in a more programmatic software driven way.
I'll say the other thing, Amir, is that I think we really shifted the paradigm in terms of, yes, supplies are a big part of what we do, but they're like they're the must-have. They're like the lifeline. They're the oxygen. So you can't breathe like without the oxygen. You can't leave your house without some of these supplies. But just the supplies themselves are not enough, because if you're not compliant with your treatment plan, if you don't know how to use them, if you have the wrong supplies, it might cause you bleeding, irritation, don't get like the effective treatment. Like, guess what? You're going to end up in the health system again, in the ER. And I think historically it's been viewed as kind of, and it's still viewed as a commodity, meaning you can get your sleep apnea from Joe or from, John or from whoever. But getting it in a trusted and a reliable and easy way, and then knowing really how to use it so you will be compliant and adherent. And if it's sleep apnea, you wouldn't, they'll also address things like your hypertension, your sleep, your mental health, like all those things. That's the key thing. And that's really the biggest unlock. These supplies can cost a few $1,000s a year, but the average cost of care for the members that we treat is tens of thousands of dollars a year. And a big part of it is because they either don't have the right products, don't know how to use them, or don't use them just not using them the right way. So take someone with who has an ostomy supplies can cost several $1,000s a year. But if you don't have them, or you have leakages, or you have skin irritation, you'll keep going to the ER. And the people that we are working with before starting to work with Better Health, the average time to go to the ER a year is 5 times higher than the average population. So it's a multiple of the cost of their annual supplies, just the cost of the ER visits or unnecessary healthcare visit that are driven as a result of not really knowing what to do with them and not really knowing how to manage their condition.
As you both are talking about this dynamic of not just the medical supply, but the actual person involved and the peer support included. When we first started off and we mentioned meet patients where they're at, I bet you a lot of people were thinking, well, are we going to meet them just in a better location to drop off their medical supplies? Is that what we're talking about? And as you guys are talking, I think the dynamic is much more complex. It's not just the physical supply. It's actually meet them where they're at mentally. If they are in a position where they need somebody to talk to, if it's an emotional support thing, obviously giving them choices and selection. I think when we talk about meeting patients where they're at, and in this case, we're talking about medical supplies, but in a bigger scale of just providing care to a patient, you quickly start seeing how tweaks to the system, modernization, gives the patient options and choices. And I think that optionality doesn't always exist. Is that by design, that optionality? Is that part of the power of what you guys are doing, is to give people that optionality?
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's exactly how we talk about internally. If you kind of visualize two sides of the spectrum for patients, right? One example would be somebody coming out of a surgery. They're in sort of like the fog of war. They've just had this life-changing, altering surgery. They're trying to figure out, what does that mean for me? How do I, utilize these products now that all of a sudden I have to use? It's no longer like optional. And so, meeting somebody where they're at in that context is very different than, say, somebody who has 10 plus years of experience with their condition. They have maybe already have an existing supplier, although they might not be happy with them. They have their products that they use, their known trusted brands of products that they're comfortable with. So there's a whole spectrum in between those two states where our job is to assess where that patient is in their healthcare journey and then match our services and products accordingly.
Absolutely. I guess I haven't, you mentioned AI, Gen AI at some point, I believe, Adam, in the conversation. And you guys are collecting data. You guys are collecting data in a way that maybe is different than other ways being done because of size, process, all these different obstacles. You guys had an opportunity to collect data from a new perspective. I guess when you're looking at potentially meeting patients where they're at and looking at what AI, and I don't even know if we need to talk about generative AI, but just in general, AI in general can help in terms of that equation of meeting patients where they're at, finding better opportunities to serve them. Where's the, I guess, some of the areas where having the data will allow you guys to be able to do that down the road or currently?
Yeah. I mean, I can speak to maybe the two ways in which we think about where to apply AI to improve the patient experience. There's the patient-facing experience, which is an area that we're just starting to think about. We haven't really introduced a lot of AI-focused products or features in that yet. We've been somewhat hesitant there, and I can explain why. But the area in which we've really seen a lot of ROI and investment is really on the back office side of things. So things like processing documentation to just make that faster, which ultimately translates into a better patient experience because they can get their supplies shipped faster. But it's not necessarily patient facing in that sense. So I'd say a lot of the work that we've done using different providers, different AI models, has been in trying to kind of create efficiencies in the back office and the internal tooling side of the house. That being said, we are starting to experiment with different patient-facing solutions as well. So things like AI-driven resupply calls, where you can talk with a voice agent to be able to get your resupply processed in a much easier way. You don't have to get a call back from a person if you're ready to place your order. You can just go on and talk to an agent, without any wait time and that sort of thing. So we are starting to dip our toes into the water there. But I would say, so far the majority of the wins that we've had applying generative AI and other AI models has been on the back office side of the house.
Yeah, I'll just add to that really the way we're using it, and I would say most of our technology in general is really to free people to do what they're uniquely positioned to do, and that's that human-to-human connection. I think especially in healthcare, I was recently in a conference and people asked obviously about AI, and I asked the audience, I was like, well, how many of you would rather be seen by an AI doctor versus a real doctor? Can you guess how many people raised their hand? Zero. Because there is that trust and relationship. And I think Adam mentioned it earlier, but we talk to our members more than any of their other providers, like about 10 to 12 times a year on average. So through that, we're really able to build trust, a relationship that drives our high engagement. And if you ask any payer, any provider, what is the number one thing that you're most focused on, it would actually be first and foremost, before cancer, before specific condition, engagement. Because if you can't get a hold of the member, there's no way you're going to help them. So really, the relationship that we're building through the value that we're providing to people for the human-to-human connection is what enables this, crazy engagement, and what enables us to drive value for our members and for all of our partners. So really the way we're leveraging technology is kind of how can we free more people time, reduce, errors, do all the tedious things kind of in the background to free them to work on that connection and drive value.
Very cool. I mean, I think when we first started recording, I had some preconceived ideas of what some of these pieces meant. As I've been talking to you both, it's very clear that there's a, empathy behind the delivery of these products and features and services that are uniquely trying to help the end customer. So it's really awesome to see. I know you guys have to get back to actually doing the day job, so I appreciate your time. I appreciate you guys coming on and talking with me. If somebody wants to reach out, talk to you a little bit more about the company, or maybe they just have a question from the podcast, is there a good way of connecting with either of you?
Yeah, LinkedIn, or go to our website, write to us. Like, we love hearing from people. We're hiring for several roles, so love talking to people who are passionate about healthcare and really want to push the envelope on what we can do next and how can we, deliver more value and while reducing costs, because that's one of the biggest problems, I would say, in our health system. So always looking to talk to good people.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you again for being on. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, man.
Thank you so much, Amir.
Absolutely. That's it for the episode. Be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. Obviously, Naama and Adam were on talking about healthcare, medical supplies, but really we actually got into understanding when we say meet patients where they're at, what that really means. And it's not just the actual product, physical delivery. There's a lot more behind it about people's mental, emotional state, making it just easier, removing the friction as well. I thought it was an excellent episode. Please share this with somebody else who might be interested, who might find the conversation of value. Please do that. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the podcast is going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.